Have you ever wondered, and you probably have, why we are pulled to do certain activities and have certain interests? Why something appeals and pulls us in a certain moment where you're like, yeah, I really feel like doing that thing. Whereas, of course, there's other things, there's tasks, there's chores, there's work, whatever it may be, where you're feeling a bit less of that pull. Now, you may do it anyway, of course, there's deadlines and there's responsibilities and so on, but you're just not feeling that pull, that thing that really gets your attention and helps you want to do that thing, whatever it is. Well, my guest today is here to help explain all of that, and he really frames it around this notion of pulls, the things that pull us in. So Matt Jarman is my guest today, and he has developed a whole system of tools and framework to help us navigate this. Now, ostensibly, it's kind of built around the ADHD brain and that mindset, but we're a little careful to not lean too much into those labels because, you know, whether you're multipotentialite or not, ADHD or not, or anything else really, these are the kinds of tools and framework that can help you navigate all kinds of tasks and things that you need to do. But it's really kind of framed around that notion of, well, why do we choose to do the things that we want to do? What pulls us in to say, yeah, I really want to do that thing? As opposed to, it feels like a bit of a chore, or I may do it, but I'm just really not all that excited and motivated to do it. And as Matt explains, with the ADHD brain, that can be quite a challenge and a struggle because it's really about managing the executive function, which is an interesting part of all this. The executive function of our brain is how we go about kind of planning and organizing and structuring things and making sense of things in that logical way. And as Matt explains, the ADHD brain can struggle with that, at least in a long time, maybe in short spurts. But that's where, you know, you feel your attention wandering, or even the thought of doing something. It's like, yeah, but I just don't really feel like kind of wrapping my brain around that. That's your executive functioning kind of pushing back and saying, well, I'm not interested, or I don't feel capable, or maybe there's other kinds of stimuli going around as well. So it's a lot to kind of, you know, absorb and take in. And well, how are we going to navigate our way as multipotentialites, especially of balancing our interests and the things we want to do with the things that we have to do, and try to find some enjoyment, of course, of it too. You know, we want to enjoy the things that we need to do, or at least feel satisfied in doing it. So Matt has this great framework, and he's here to tell us all about it. It's something that's going to be really helpful, I know, to a lot, if not all of our listeners and viewers here. So I'm really excited to share what he has to offer, and let's dive into the conversation. Alrighty, welcome back. This is the Multipod. I'm very pleased to be joined by Matt Jarman, and this is a conversation we've been trying to line up for many months, so I'm very excited that it's happening. And Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I know we have a lot of things in common, which is always a fun starting point. A lot of interests in travel and languages and stuff like that. You're not too far from me. Of course, I'm in Quebec, and you're just over the border in Ithaca, in New York State. But you did mention you speak a bit of French, so bienvenue.
Merci.
Here's the funny thing. I'm reading a book right now. Oh, what's it called? It's called Molokai. It's about a leper colony in Hawaii. It's a well-known book. It was published about 20-something years ago. And the experience of a girl who grows up in this colony, and it's a fascinating story. It's a historical novel. But I bring it up because one of the main characters, one of the nuns who lives in the colony and helps, she's from Ithaca. And I just last night read this part where after 30 years, she leaves Hawaii, the island, finally to go back and visit her long lost brother kind of thing. And, you know, this is in 1925 or 30 or something. And it describes how, you know, she takes a ship through the Panama Canal to New York City and Penn Station and the train, and she arrives in Ithaca. And it actually talks about people walking around the town and some of the houses and the look of the houses and the campus and stuff like that.
Oh, that's so funny.
Just last night, total coincidence.
Wow. Yeah.
How long have you been there?
We've been here 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah. I haven't been yet, but it's definitely on our list to drop in sometime.
Yeah, come visit.
What brought you there?
We live at a small eco village in the area, cool. And it just seemed like a great place to raise our kids, and so that's why we came.
Nice. Where are you from originally?
From Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah, so grew up in Orange County, and then went to school there, then moved to Florida for
Oh, yeah.
postdoc and teaching a little bit, and then went to Virginia,
Mm.
teach there for 5 years, and then we finally landed here.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing we want to really revolve around today is talking about ADHD and multipotentiality. And I was thinking about it the last couple of days, like this. I mean, it's the topic that's perhaps come up more than anything in the history of the show. But I don't know if we've ever done like a real dedicated episode trying to dig into it, and maybe some of the science, or psychology and that kind of stuff behind it too. So this is a big part of where you put your focus, but of course, along with a whole bunch of other interests. But maybe we'll start with that as kind of what's your relationship with, well, ADHD for starters.
Yeah. So I have ADHD, and so that has been both a source of struggle throughout school, but also eventually I really consider it my superpower, a great asset.
Yeah.
Now that I've kind of learned techniques for managing it, and so I'm a psychologist. I call myself a productivity psychologist. So as opposed to a clinical therapist, I'm trained in organizational psychology, which focuses on work-related behavior, and my focus is on productivity. And so it's been interesting, over the years, getting my PhD and studying that, seeing kind of, while also having ADHD and trying to figure out how to kind of do well in school and then work with ADHD, with what I know about psychology and productivity. And so that's kind of, I've always been interested in productivity, and more recently I've realized that in particular, these techniques that I've been developing help me, and I struggle with ADHD, and they've helped me to not struggle with it. And so I've realized that that's kind of what I've been working towards for a long time.
Cool. And then I know you have like coaching programs and similar support groups and stuff. So is the idea to transfer, what you've learned to help others with those kinds of skills?
Yeah. So I've developed a productivity and framework that has 4 different kind of key factors that I'm sure we'll talk about that I think drive productivity, and each has different techniques. And so in those programs, it's basically about teaching people the framework and the techniques so that they can apply them when they need to in their lives.
And thus far, how kind of transferable or maybe universal are the skills, the things that you learn? Like, is it stuff that people can apply? Because maybe one assumption that I might have is that everyone's ADHD is different. Everyone experiences it in a different way. So how transferable are the skills, the techniques that you've learned to your average kind of person with ADHD?
Yeah, they're very much so.
Okay.
I've spent a long time trying to distill productivity into kind of like its kind of essential kind of drivers.
Yeah.
And so basically I focus on how you manage your mind. So that's your mental energy, your thoughts, your emotions, how you manage your tasks, kind of prioritizing tasks, breaking it down into smaller pieces, how you manage your time. So how do you make the best use of the limited time you have in the day and use that as kind of an advantage, actually, to create a sense of kind of manageable urgency to complete tasks.
Yeah.
And then what I call managing your pulls, which is the connection with multipotentiality, which is about kind of what tasks you feel drawn to pursue. And but each of these have different techniques that, everyone kind of, regardless of kind of how your brain works, if you're not managing your mind, your tasks, your time, and your pulls in some basic way, then you're going to be struggling. And so these, I have a number of different techniques, and some might work more effectively for you, in which case you go with those. But in general, these skills are very teachable and really applicable to people with ADHD, and even without ADHD, if they're just struggling with productivity for other reasons.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Well, I guess I have to ask, I mean, what's it been like in your experience to try to navigate, life, academics, work, all these things as someone with ADHD? Like, do do you recognize the kind of roadblocks and the friction, that comes from that? Like, what does it feel like essentially to have it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the common experiences people have with ADHD is distraction, procrastination, and resisting certain tasks and just wanting to do other things. But so I think of the ADHD mind as what I call pull seeking. So the ADHD mind is seeking out things, activities that will pull it in, because the executive function, the mental skills that you need to kind of plan things out and get work done tend to be low for the ADHD mind. And so it's looking for things that will pull it in that require less executive function. Right. And so when you're distracted, it's because your current activity is not pulling you in. And so you're looking for activities that will. And so some of the techniques that I use focus on managing those pulls. So the question is, how can you make the boring task feel like one that pulls you in? And so I think I've gotten good over the years at doing that. And so ADHD for me hasn't been as much of a problem. Whereas in the past, in grad school, if I'm studying for a class or a topic that's boring, sure, it's going to be difficult to kind of stick with that. But then over the years, as I have more control over, what I focus on in terms of my research or my work, I'm able to pursue topics that pull me in. And so if anything, it's more of an asset. It's more of a gift to kind of be able to hyper focus on those things that I want to be working on.
So how do you define a pull? Is it based on a feeling?
Yeah. So if you feel pulled, you feel eager and excited to dive into something. So I think most multipotentialites are essentially people who seek out activities that pull them in, right? So that people are very familiar with that. And you can have big pulls and small pulls, right? So from my perspective, if you have a big project that you're not looking forward to and you've been resisting and putting off, even finding a small angle to kind of get excited about, like, oh, maybe I'll approach it this way. Oh yeah, that would be kind of, just that small pull is enough to kind of overcome the resistance and make it easier to dive into it.
Okay. Interesting. So you kind of have to, it's about finding maybe excitement or something of interest in a task. And I guess the point is that some things it's more instinctive or immediate than other things. You're excited to learn about, dive into a topic or a project versus washing more dishes, I suppose, or something like that.
Sure. Right. Yeah. And I think the problem is that we don't tend to naturally be good at kind of creating pulls in activities that aren't natural sources of a pull, right? And so I think that's kind of the skill that we need to work on and practice. So whereas it's easy for some topics to kind of catch our attention, and then we're like, oh yeah, that pulls me in. But how do you find a way to get excited about this other boring task? And so I have different techniques for doing that, for helping people to kind of think kind of differently about approaching their work.
Okay. And then what about like the whole thing with multipotentialites? We have an interest, we discover something new, we usually dive right in, and it may last a few hours, it could last weeks or months, but it pretty much always seems to be that point where, we've lost interest or we're ready to move on. And maybe we do or we don't, I suppose, maybe take a break. But how does that kind of fit into the frame of ADHD and having a pull? And like, is there it would seem that the pulls wear off, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The pulls can come and go. And on the one hand, I think it's fine to, dive into something a little bit. And then once you get what you want out of it, you do something else. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. But also I do think it's important to consider the kind of source of the pull changing. So for example, if it's a productivity issue, so I define productivity as basically intentional action. So kind of taking action that's aligned with your goals. And so if you're, drawn towards some new skill and you dive into it, and then it starts getting more difficult, and then you don't have the productivity skills to manage your mental energy and kind of your resistance towards it, or the tasks involved with moving forward or managing your time. If it's that you're not doing a good job of, or you lack those skills, and then that's why now it feels like too much effort, and then you're going to change course. Like that seems unfortunate to me, because if you had those skills, then perhaps you could go deeper on it. Right. But it's not to say that you necessarily would. You, even with those skills, you might decide, no, I've gotten what I want out of it. So I would just like to see more people who, where it's a choice, right? I'm choosing to stop, as opposed to I'm stopping because now I'm struggling to move forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. The intentionality of things, that you make that choice to stop or start or whatever it is, but it's a conscious choice.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I guess I'm curious too. Then, I mean, we can see how psychological we get here, and scientific and so on. But I mean, it's kind of understanding really what is ADHD when your research and your experience. I mean, is it a kind of a chemical thing in the brain then, and like how does it maybe develop in some people versus others? And I guess ultimately, to really relate it to the audience is the fact that a lot of multipotentialites, and we've seen in Puttyverse and other places too, like a lot of people say, yeah, I'm ADHD, and in some shape or form is a very common thing amongst multipotentialites, maybe even whether we realize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So in your experience, your research, is there a clear link? Is there an explanation why it's multipotentialites who really reflect having ADHD a lot, and it seems to have that common link?
Yeah, well, in the research, I don't think there's a clear kind of consensus on what it is exactly and what causes it, and so that's less clear. And in some ways, I don't think it's as important necessarily for our purposes. If this is how our mind works, it's how our mind works, and then what skills do we need to move forward with it. But there are some interesting perspectives that argue that over time, from an evolutionary perspective, it made sense for some portion of communities to have people whose minds have a tendency to seek out different creative, alternative things, right? So from a creativity perspective, to kind of pursue different paths, that ultimately benefits the community. And so you can make the argument that, from that perspective, and I tend to agree with this, it's not that ADHD is a problem or a disorder, but it's just natural for some people's minds to work this way. And the problem is when you have a mind that works like this, that is pull seeking, that's seeking out pulls in an environment such as work or school, where that is often more difficult, where you're just supposed to focus on the things you should be doing, not the things that are pulling at you. And so that's where you really have to kind of redirect and channel that pull seeking tendency towards your work. And that's when you do your best work, right? And so that's when it becomes an asset, when you're able to do that.
Yeah, okay. So what role does a coach then have in helping people with ADHD and multipotentialites, maybe in particular, but, navigating through this? Is it the coach to keep people accountable? Does it help to explain how this works? Or what's been your experience in coaching others?
Yeah. For me, coaching in my mind, so particularly if you have ADHD and you're considering working with a therapist versus an ADHD coach, in my mind, the key difference is ADHD coaching is much more action focused. So whenever I work with people, it's all about, here's the framework, understanding how this framework applies to you, and then here are the techniques for each of the different core domains.
Right.
And then it's practicing, applying, and using those techniques. And so in the beginning, when I work with people, it's first teaching them the techniques and how to apply them and how they fit into their life, and how help them to make those a habit where needed. And then once they understand that, then it's helping them to kind of troubleshoot, right? So this week I couldn't get this done. That I didn't finish this paper on time, or this report on time. And then we analyze it in terms of this framework. Okay, what was happening and what could you do differently next time? And so it's really kind of troubleshooting and figuring out how these techniques can help with that.
Okay. And tell us a bit more about your program then, in terms of like, is it designed to go kind of parallel with coaching, or is it a different type of structure maybe?
Yeah. So I have a 4-week group program that's focused on teaching this kind of core toolbox, sort of, the productivity framework and all the core skills. And so the goal with that is that it be this standalone thing where after this program, you have what I consider the key skills that you need to thrive with ADHD. Mm-hmm. And some people will choose to continue working with me one-on-one after that. But many don't, and that's fine. The intention is that once you have that, you at least have this core kind of toolbox that you can use as needed.
Yeah, cool.
So there's a group program for students and also one for professionals that kind of anyone can join. And then I also have a similar program that I take into workplaces for business teams that are focused on productivity in general. And then also the nice thing is if there are team members who have ADHD, and nowadays there probably are, then they'll also particularly benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another question too, is the program in particular, or even generally your coaching, is it different, if it's, I suppose, kids or teenagers versus middle-aged adults versus seniors? Because I notice a lot of, in my experience, it seems a lot of people, the older they get, maybe they only recognize it for the first time, but they really see that there's ADHD, that's part of their life. So is your coaching geared, does it need to be geared in different ways depending who you're working with?
Yeah. All my coaching focuses on this kind of productivity, kind of intentional action piece. And as long as that's something that someone that is relevant, if some people, retirement and older age is still very much focused on projects and these different things, in which case the same techniques apply. I just finished working with a client who's retired and has a ton of different projects, and so we applied the same techniques in the same way. Of course, their situations will be different, and so it's just figuring out how to apply these in their situation, but it's still the same fundamental techniques.
Okay. Is the program something you can do remotely?
Yeah. So all of my coaching and programs are remote. Yeah. Okay. So people from anywhere can participate.
So is accountability part of it at all? Like, do you feel the need to kind of make sure people are following the program and kind of doing the thing? Or is that part of what they learn, is to kind of keep themselves accountable?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, so with part of the reason that we struggle so much is we lack kind of an understanding of what we, quote, should be doing to improve, right? And so this framework gives you a sort of map to move forward. And so with this, you now understand, okay, I should be doing these things when I'm mentally depleted and just not in the mood to do work. And so with that awareness then comes kind of the ability to determine when you're not doing that and how to get back on course. So it makes it easier to kind of keep yourself accountable, because now you actually have a map and a path forward. But then also with my coaching, when I'm working with people, either one-on-one or in a group, I'll also send check-in text messages in between, both as kind of a reminder, and also if to invite people to ask questions or let me know how things are going. But in some ways, just knowing that I'm there and kind of checking on them is often enough to kind of remind them, oh yeah, I should be doing this and I need to get back on track.
I see. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. Well, yeah, this is interesting. I've thought a lot about maybe even just the last few months with my work, and being self-employed is interesting because, you've got to do everything, of course, and there's no boss to check in on you, which is what I want. But at the same time, like, I've got to be accountable and all that to myself. And I recognize that, like, I really, really operate based on what I feel like doing. Mm-hmm. And if I have deadlines, like, I always get things done. And I think that's part of that. Maybe this speaks to the pulls and the tools, in that knowing that I have a deadline, I have to get something done, even if I don't feel like doing it. But there's that reward that shows me the purpose that, okay, because there's a deadline and I don't want to miss that deadline. So even if I don't feel like it, I'll do it. But if I don't have a deadline, I'm like, yeah, I don't really feel like working on that today. It's very, very much based on feel. And it's not even just work. It's any kind of thing. Do I feel like playing music? Do I feel like, reading a book or whatever it is, right? Like I find I'm very, very oriented around just what do I feel like doing? And it's nice. I like being able to live that way. I like that, I kind of follow my nose and not feel like, have as much freedom as possible, I suppose, to kind of just do what I'm interested in doing, in that moment as much as possible. So, I don't know if that makes me part ADHD or whatever. Like, maybe this is an important question. How do people go about eventually getting a diagnosis or kind of working along that path, right? Like, where do you start? Are there tests? Are there just tools that you can learn to figure out if you even are or not?
Yeah. It's a good question. And many of the ADHD symptoms that, are common, distractedness, inattention, those are experienced by all of us, right? And so it's often a matter of degree and intensity. And from my perspective, in some ways, it's not as important to me whether or not you, quote, have ADHD.
Yeah.
Unless, if you're considering whether to take medication and stuff like that, then it's a more important question. But for me, with these behavioral techniques, they'll help regardless. And so it becomes a little bit less important, but there are different reasons that we finally kind of engage in action and do the things that we want to do. And if we're not feeling pulled by the task itself, another strong source of a pull is time running out, right? And so that's why we often procrastinate.
Yeah.
And similarly, another reason that we often don't do the tasks that we know we should be doing is our mind control, our mental energy, our cognitive resources are low and lower than what is kind of needed to kind of put the effort into to do the task. And so it takes getting to a point where you feel like you have to do it, and then you finally do. Right. But that's because, you lack the skills. Like, there are simple techniques you can do to increase your mental energy and your cognitive resources, which would then make it far easier to jump into the task. There are ways to use time management to your advantage to feel that urgency earlier in the process, so that you're not waiting until the end. And so I think that that's very much where the skills would benefit you greatly. And it doesn't really matter if you have or don't have ADHD, the same skills will help. And I think one of the reasons that more and more people kind of question whether they have ADHD is because when we're in these high stress, situations, work environments, when we're not getting as much sleep and emotionally, those conditions lead to low mind control, to low executive function. Yeah. And then you're going to see ADHD-like behaviors and experiences, right? So kind of whether that's just naturally how your brain works or it's being caused by a change in your conditions, the techniques you use to, are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, one last question, and then maybe this is one of these elementary things that maybe you can clear up, but if there is a difference these days as things evolve between ADHD and ADD?
Yeah.
Because everyone seems to say ADHD these days, but.
Right. My understanding is that, in general, we tend to just use the ADHD label. And there's some discussion of whether, some people's experience of this have more of a hyperactive component, in which case they might identify more with ADHD versus non-hyperactive. There's some ways to categorize different types of ADHD in terms of whether it has that or not. But my default these days is just to use ADHD, and that's just the easiest and more common way you hear it discussed.
It seems that way, yeah. And anyway, as we're saying, what are labels anyway?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I want to, before we wrap up, we got a few more minutes, but I want to get into some of the details and logistics of how people can, contact you and find out more about your program and all that. But I do have one multi-potentialite question. So to me, it seems like you're putting kind of all of your time and effort and focus and everything into this wonderful project of helping people with ADHD and finding these tools and everything. So what else keeps you interested and busy? What are your other pulls that are probably nothing at all related to this? And how do you balance and juggle that with clearly the amount of time and everything it takes, working on your everyday work?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I think this is where the magic of using these pulls comes in and allows you to kind of thrive in your work. So my focus is always, how can I bring my pulls and apply them to this, or find the pulls in my work? So one of the biggest pulls for me is sketchnoting. So this is where you draw very simple sketches, simple drawings that capture some concept. So it's not art. It's a very simple, it could be stick figure drawings. And then it has like an explanatory text label. So you might have like a bullseye, and then underneath you say success or productivity or something, right? So it's clear what that represents. And then you have arrows and you kind of show how those things relate to one another. And I love thinking it really pulls me in to think of, okay, how can I capture this concept, like managing your mind? Like, how can I capture that in a simple picture? And how do I show how that relates to other things? And so I spend, hours just kind of figuring out what to draw and then how to draw it. And then I use those in my programs. So like right now I'm updating my group program to incorporate more of those in the teaching portions. So I use those drawings because I think that it makes it far more engaging for people than just like the bullets on a typical slide. And it's more engaging for me. I'm also a magician, and right now I have idea after this call. I'm going to be I have some ideas for how, when I'm kind of meet people and explain my approach, how I can incorporate like some magic into that. And so I'm excited to kind of explore how I could do that. And so it all kind of feeds the work that I'm doing and is how I stay engaged with it.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have other interests that have nothing at all to do with this as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. Although I'm constantly trying to connect them. There's this idea of complexity that my advisor in graduate school. So I worked with Mike Csikszentmihalyi, who is the kind of a father of positive psychology, and he focused on flow and the conditions of experiencing flow. And he spoke about complexity, where a system is more complex when it's high in differentiation, different parts, and integration. Those parts are connected. And so he made the point that if you're going to pursue different activities, if they are not just different, but also have these integrative links, it's going to be easier to pursue them, and it'll be easier to continue kind of down that path because they also feed the other things. Like it's all compatible. And so most of the different things that I am interested in I tend to find a way to link them in, like the languages, like let's learn the vocab in Spanish and French, and then let's try to start doing some coaching in those languages.
Okay.
So I find ways to bring it all in. And then I feel like I have kind of permission to pursue these different things, because I can say, oh, it's work related.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
The old permission.
Yeah.
But that's a neat way of doing it. Yeah. Trying to integrate all the interests into what you do. That's cool.
And one thing that brings to mind too is, I think I would predict a high correlation between people with ADHD and whether they're a multipotentialite. It's not, there are certainly people who have ADHD and aren't multipotentialites, and people who are multipotentialites without ADHD.
Right.
But I think if you have ADHD and are a multipotentialite, then the way you pursue those pulls will probably be kind of a little bit different in terms of it being kind of more intense, and it'll be harder to manage sometimes. And so I think that these other skills around managing your mind, your tasks, and your time become particularly important to keep those multipotentialite tendencies, those pull-seeking tendencies, from taking you away from achieving your goals. And so I think these sorts of skills become that much more important, so that multipotentialite tendencies aren't disruptive in your life, and instead just kind of allow you to kind of thrive.
Yeah, they're very much life skills, right? Not just for a job or something, but day-to-day life skills. Yeah, interesting.
Right.
Good. Well, that's a good lead in. So if people are watching and listening and they want to take further steps to work with you, how do they do that? Where do they go first?
Yeah. On my website, productiveforgood.org. So that's productiveforgood.org. You can sign up for the newsletter there. There's also a free productivity self-assessment if you're curious kind of where you fall in these 4 domains. And then on the website, there's a wait list where you can sign up for the group program. So that's just to be the first to hear about it when the next one goes live. And then there's also information on the one-on-one coaching there. And I'll also be, one of the projects I'm working on right now is creating a mini course that's kind of an introduction to the framework. And that will be live soon. And if you're on the mailing list, you'll hear about it. But otherwise, I really love connecting with multipotentialites, in particular, with ADHD or not. And so people should feel free to email me, matt@productiveforgood.org. And the last thing, the kind of the last way to connect, I'm always working on these sketch notes, these drawings that I'm trying to use in my work. And I've had the idea of starting a kind of a private group for people who just are interested in that sort of thing and would be curious to see drafts of that and maybe give feedback. And I think they'd just be interesting sources of discussion. So if you're interested in being in that group, feel free to email me and let me know, and I'll add you. I think that could be just a fun way to connect with people.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Cool. Okay, well, we'll get all that in the notes here. How often do you do the group sessions, the group programs? Like, is it a strict schedule?
Not yet. Currently, it's every few months. Eventually, I'd like it to be closer to every 1 to 2 months. It's in part based on interest and demand. So the more people who get on that wait list, that's when I know that there's enough people interested to start a new one. But my hope is to do them more frequently over time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Neat. Well, this is great. Yeah. I'm thinking like between our last episode there with Sarah Beth and the books that she's writing and the programs and coaching that you're writing and the website and lots of other people, of course, too. Like there's great resources, but they're fresh resources too. People are really still working on things and continuing to evolve and adapt what's out there, which is great to see.
Yeah. These are kind of exciting new approaches that have a lot of promise. Sure.
Neat. Yeah, cool. Thanks. Well, I'm really glad we got to do this and get to know you a bit better and share what you're working on. And let us know if you hear from some people. We can share some more stories. And it's been great to have you on the Multipod.
Yeah, thank you. I've had a lot of fun. Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks. I'm reflecting again on just how great and neat it is that there are a lot of great new resources, and there's people, you might even say like another generation, a new generation of people who are studying this, who are doing it for a living, who are really putting a lot of time and energy into developing new resources for people. Again, well, whatever you want to say, multipotentialites and polymaths and ADHD and any of these kinds of labels or non-labels. It's true. I really, labels are helpful in trying to, kind of organize things, but we're so much more than our labels. Just like Sarah Beth says there, we're so much more than our titles. So all of it kind of wraps around, well, we clearly approach life, the world, work, interests in our own way, where we want to have that kind of control. We want flexibility and not have to conform to, as we know, specializing and having to choose and commit to one thing. We like to have that flexibility. So, all the communities and the people who identify that way, and these are the tools that are great to help us understand that and navigate it and maybe come up with different ways. So this wonderful what Matt's doing here with his coaching and his group program and that whole framework of identifying where your strengths are and really leaning into the power of your brain. I mean, especially again with the ADHD identity of recognizing, well, this is just how my brain works. That's fine. It's just a matter of understanding that and kind of pivoting and accommodating so that you make the most of it and even lean into it. I love when he says that it's his superpower. I've heard other people say that too, hey, they're glad they have ADHD because, it helps them focus and be productive in different ways. It's just understanding and really figuring out how to make the most of that, and then you're kind of off to the races. So, it's an ongoing practice for sure in developing those skills and all the rest, but yeah, wonderful to have the resources, and it's great to have Matt here today to share them with all of us. So as always, I do encourage you to reach out, not just to check out his website, of course, and his programs, but say hello, share some of your thoughts, your feedback, and how you're responding to what he's saying and what he has to offer. That's the kind of connection that we really want to make with this show. So I do encourage you to reach out and send that email. And also, like he was saying with the drawing and the illustrations, right? If you're someone that loves to do that and to doodle and do little sketches, well, reach out and make that connection too. To build a little group, a small community that shares that interest and works on some projects together, that'd be a wonderful thing to build out of this episode and the things that Matt's doing. And share your thoughts with me too if you've talk to Matt or, of course, any of our other guests and had some good conversations and made some connections. We'd love to hear about it here, too, on the Multipod. So do reach out. Themultipod.com is our website. You can reach me there. You can fill out our guest form if you're interested in coming on the show, sharing your interests, finding other people to connect with. That's what we're here for, and I'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time.